told you we always been ready. I don't need people that's petty, that weigh on me heavy while I'm being steady. I need a record with Felly. We get it bouncing like Betty's, I feel like I'm Nelly. Don't bring the beef like a deli. It's leave on a levy, no sleeping on me like I'm Freddy. Chris Breeze, how I do, hit him with the moves. Left hand step back, ballin' like I'm cool. All faith, God's plan, you just gotta choose. God slaps, nothing left to prove. Y'all gotta leave me alone. Lately I've been in my zone. Told them no cap like a fitted, but lately the flows have been straight off the dome. I feel like I'm MVP, like my name Patty Mahomes. If it ain't about money, don't hit on my phone, cause lately I've been in my zone.
Hello, welcome to the Cowboys Show, hosted by Ben Carey and Nick Gronerad, combining expert human opinions with cutting-edge simulation models to help you arrive at the best picks each week. Inside Edge Community. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another college football preview stream. I'm Ben Carey. Joining me is Yvetta. How are we doing this morning?
Doing great, Ben. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Other than the Broncos.
Oh God.
I think I'm still finally, I'll put it this way. I'm over the fact that we gave up 70, but I'm like still just like, what the hell is going on with our season? Are we tanking? Are we gonna try to win? I have no clue. I know you weren't at that game. You were at another Florida game. You're at the Jags game, right?
Yeah. So same sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah. Similarly, but I will say like the Jags overall have just been, I don't know. It's like you were watching. What's going on with their offense?
I don't know, man. Like I don't know if it's our offensive line. There's been some speculation. It's we had a couple people hurt, but not to the point where I don't know. Offensive line, defensive line. I don't know. Ridley. I think if Ridley would have had more targets and didn't drop that ball, and I think Agnew had that fumble, or I try to forget that game.
Yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of like plays where things could have swayed a little bit differently, but
right. Yeah, I think things could have gone in our favor, or at least it would have been a closer game. But then, how do you stop Dell? I mean,
I know.
I don't know. It was wild. So yeah, so I'm with you on the NFL.
Yeah. You know what's funny though is like I've actually had some really good luck thus far on the NFL betting wise, and I've just been on the right side of things. And there's always those 50-50 games, and sometimes you're on the right side, sometimes you're not. But college football, I will admit, thus far, I have not been on the right side of a lot of the 50-50 spots. I've lost 3 unders going into OT, which has hurt the record a little bit, but I feel good just because I'm, getting good CLV. I'm watching the games. A lot of these games are the ones I'm losing. They're toss-ups, so I feel decent about it. But I feel like you've been off to a pretty good start, right?
Yeah. So far, the first, I think week 2 was kind of rough. I think it was week 2, something like that. But then it kind of rebounded from there. So yeah, did you have, because we had a situation with the Miami Temple under last week. It closed at 46.5, and the total
landed at 48, right?
48. Yeah.
Yeah. I was on the right side of that one.
Okay, good. I
Yeah.
was like, I want to remind myself to ask Ben where he was, because depending on what time you got that in, because we had it at 51.5 and then 48. So we pushed one and we hit one.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, if you got the 47 or the 46.5, then, so sometimes that CLV really does make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, enough of those games where you have those 3 to 4 point moves, you're going to have, I don't know, on average 5 to 6 of those. They're going to be decided by the number. That was a funny one because when we talked about it on stream, it was still, I think, at 50-51, and I think we preached, we're like, hey, I think you should probably get this in. And then I tweeted about it later that day, and I was like, hey, I really like this one. I actually ended up putting a unit and a half on it, and it got dicey, right? Because I think one
Yeah.
of the
Oh,
one of the concerns is Temple like gonna stop Miami, and they didn't for a while, but luckily the fourth quarter kind of played out how I thought the whole game was going to play out. But I'll take it. I needed that one for sure. That was one. If I lost that one, I would be like, man, I would have changed the whole weekend from a betting
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. And the overtime games, you can't beat yourself up over that. I mean, that's, you can't account that. It's, just part of
I
the
know, but it sucks. It
it
because
does.
it's like one of those where it's so much like, hey, I had a really good handicap. Um, everything I thought happened, and except for it being tied, and then yeah, it's not NFL rules, so yeah, anything over like a buffer of 7 points, I assume I'm gonna lose an OT because just the way you get the ball at the 25, a lot of scoring. So, all right,
Right.
let's hop on into things. We have a lot of games to discuss. Before we do that, as always, let's talk about the weather. Kind of what we're seeing. Last week was a really crazy week. There were a lot of games affected and a lot of FCS games, and it's just crazy how late those lines come out. I was like scrambling in the morning to lock in plays, and I was feeling super under the weather on Saturday, and I'm like trying to scramble from book to book to like find these games, and like every book has it in different spots. Like I'm trying to find Cornell, and it's like where in the hell is it located on my sportsbook app? Because it's just every book is different. But luckily I got that under in. But anyways, this week though, what are we kind of seeing from a weather perspective?
Yeah, so I got the map pulled up. We have some changes. I was discussing this on Peterson last night. So we have, and which last night, late night for me, so almost 1 a.m. So and just between then and now, things have changed, which is, part of the fun of this is you get to see the better weather map light up, and even throughout the course of the day yesterday, we were starting to get this forecast was starting to get a little bit more robust. So we don't have it's still not quite as much weather as last week, but it's getting pretty close. I mean, we've got two areas basically where we could see some windy conditions. Now I should add, because there are a lot of oranges on the map right now.
Mm-hmm.
So just because the game is showing a weather impact, right, doesn't mean we're betting it. So we're putting it on our radar, and we still have to go through our process of analyzing the data and assessing how confident we are in the forecast that it will actually materialize. So just for those that don't know, we're not betting all of these, but especially when we're still 4 to 6 days out. So last week we ended up betting 19 games, but close to 50 of them triggered at one point, which is wild. So definitely a lot of weather last week.
And the hurricane kind of was to thank for that, right? Like just with the volatility of a of a hurricane, it's not as hard. It's not as easy to predict as a typical kind of a forecast as what you would see on a weekly basis, right?
Exactly. And as it moves, anything over water is usually a little bit trickier. The models are usually not in agreement. And then as it moves, and that's as that system evolves, the games that are affected change. And so it's almost like sometimes it's almost like it's changing in real time, and you have to just constantly stay on top of it. But our first focus area for this week is the Plain States. So we have a low pressure system that's forecast to come through the Intermountain West. The models are really conflicted on the timing and intensity of this system. We think that they'll start to come together here in the next couple days, but one is showing significantly higher winds than the other, and even with respect to rainfall, they're not in agreement. So we've got basically all of Texas, or not all of Texas, but a lot of Texas now in the moderate category. So winds around 15 miles per hour, and actually Colorado too. So your neck of the woods, Colorado, Wyoming, we're seeing 3 out of the 4 games there in that moderate range, about 15 miles per hour. And those were not moderate yesterday. So that means that the confidence is growing for the forecast in that area. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. We still haven't locked anything in that area. So all we've got is we locked in Houston at Texas
Yeah,
Tech.
tell me about that one specifically from a weather perspective, because I want to talk about this one because these teams, I think, for the most part, will like to air it out a little bit. Um, it's looking like what you guys have on here is 20 miles per hour, a little bit of rain potentially. What are you seeing for gusts?
Yeah, so just slightly higher gusts, maybe up to 25 miles per hour.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but Texas is always kind of hairy because you kind of never know. It's always fairly low confidence just of the nature of Texas and how wide
Mhm.
open it is. But that one we've actually felt pretty confident about. So that Michigan, Nebraska, and then that Houston, Texas Tech. And what you've noticed is if which you do, I know you follow the website pretty closely, but you've noticed
Mhm.
that those have stayed red. So those have not uh,
Yeah.
wavered much in the course of the last few days. So now the issue with that Houston, Texas Tech line is it's already dropped about 5 points since the open. But I think that was on the quarterback news when they announced that the quarterback was out for 6 to 8 weeks because of that fibula. I think that was announced
Mhm.
maybe yesterday morning or something like that.
Yeah, so that was probably more of the move than any weather related news.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's still a little bit of value there weather-wise because I think that move may have been related to that. And then the second area of concern is we have this lingering low pressure offshore. It's not as impactful, but in the mid Atlantic. So that could bring some windy conditions to the eastern seaboard. And that can impact games like Notre Dame and Duke. That game it did go orange yesterday into the moderate category, but it's back to green now. So we'll have to keep an eye on that area as well.
I'm
And
on
then
that under, by the way, so that would be nice
uh-huh,
if we get some more more weather news to help with that one.
to substantiate that. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm on that under as well, just in general. So, yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that. And then Washington at Arizona is another one that we're a little bit more confident on. It should be hot and windy. There's also some blowing dust, so there's a fire weather risk in the area. Uh, so we're a little bit more confident on that. But the rest of the orange dots that you see, uh, we're just watching. So lots of variance in the forecast, and we expect to see a lot of changes in the next day or two.
Nice. And I want to let people know with FCS, I think a lot of us who are tuning in know about this, but the lines aren't coming out as early as they have had in seasons prior. And there's a few reasons for this. Five Dimes was one of the originators that it was an offshore book that isn't in operation anymore. And they were getting out FCS lines, I think, by like Wednesday of the week, which is great. Because, from our perspective, it's like, oh, put out a line, and then now we can kind of take a look at the weather forecast and get ahead of it. What we've been seeing lately is these lines come out later, so it's harder to, maybe to find an edge. But surprisingly, though, even having said that, like Saturday morning, all those FCS lines populated, and I don't know if you have a percentage of the unders that hit, but I know that I was on three of them, and I went three, 3-0. So I think Brad Powers might have said something like 14-2 or something like that, which is crazy to think about. Like we never want to preach like, oh, just blindly play unders or blindly play overs, but I mean, if the numbers support it, if the map on Better Weather supports it, I mean, if you trust it, do it, because I don't know. Do you have a record for that? With those FCS specifically
Yeah,
last week?
we do have it at I don't have it, I
And it
don't have
doesn't have to be
copy,
like the
but
ones that you
yeah.
locked in. I was just curious because yeah, it was just like they all, and they were really low totals too. And I'm not gonna lie, I got scared off a few because there was one that was like 35, 34 and a half. But yeah, a lot of
Mhm.
them hit.
Yeah, I think we may have posted it on our Twitter, the FCS record, but yeah, a lot of them hit. I'll have to pull that up, but a lot of them hit, and the key is, there's still not a lot of people betting this market. So you could still find pretty good value. And that's really great advice, Ben, because a lot of people kind of disregard the FCS games because by the time they're planning out their slate, the lines aren't out yet. So,
Yeah.
even when you pull the numbers up on Better Weather, there's no line. But if
Hmm.
if you stick with it and you're patient, once that line does come out, you can jump on that and you can get some really good value there. So because we have that cluster now in the Northeast, right? So again, that's due to that low pressure system off the Mid Atlantic there. So uh, I personally am gonna jump on at least some of those, um, as
Hmm.
soon as that line comes out. So yeah, that's definitely some good value there.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, let's hop on into some of the games here. I'm gonna get the unabated dashboard back up here. And speaking of unabated, they are sponsoring all our college football streams this fall. Both Yvette and I use unabated. I always tell you guys, I literally just have this up all the time. So um, I think at this point, like, my baby is gonna be like learning how to how to read lines subconsciously because he's literally just looking at it. So I don't know if that's good for Carson or not, but hey, he's already watching football though, which is hilarious. He's like 2.5 months, so he's finally like looking at the TV screen, and yeah, just watching him like watch football melts my heart. Except he had to watch the Broncos game though, so that was, yeah. I was like, man, he still hasn't seen a regular season win. But oh well. Hopefully this week maybe the Bears.
Yeah.
And also on that note about NFL, you guys also you guys do NFL too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just haven't seen much for NFL yet this season. It's been kind of quiet. So we did have some NFL action. I think we had three NFL games, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly, that we bet last week. But I think that might have been the first week, or maybe we had
Yeah,
one
we
other
had what,
one
Jets and
added to that.
Patriots definitely was one of those. That
Uh-huh.
one that one. I think they all went
Yeah,
under.
so
I
it's
I,
been
I
kind of
saw a
quiet
post,
on
yeah.
the on all the yeah, and all the weather seemed to have been on Saturdays so far, so I don't
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Well, we'll wait.
I'm sure it'll
I'm sure
happen
we'll,
down the
yeah.
road once it gets snowy and stuff.
We'll get one of those where, we'll have, 3 or 4 games impacted. So, let's get on into things. This is one I don't think we'll see any weather in, but really intriguing matchup. This is Oregon State taking on Utah, and this is a Friday game, I believe. Yeah, that's correct. So fun Friday game. I'm definitely gonna have a little bit of action on it. Pac-12. I mean, at this point, with the Pac-12 going away, it's like as much action as I can have on these games, I'm gonna have, because it's gonna be sad. I'll have to tell my kid one day about the Pac-12 and how the last season they actually started to turn it around with talent. Two of the teams in this game, I would say, have pretty good talent. Oregon State favored by 3 at home. So the hard thing with this one is we don't know the status of Cam Rising. It's Wednesday morning. Looking at this line, I don't think he's going to play, but again, I don't want to speculate. we saw something weird last year. We've talked about a few times with Cam Rising and how we were expecting him to play, and out of nowhere, he wasn't in warmups. So it's really hard to say with college football. In the injury reports, you don't really have to disclose that information. And I'm showing a total of 44 and a half, depending on what book you're looking at. So, Iveta, do you have any leans in this one? And I'm curious just if you're attacking this and we'll have any bets.
I'm looking at it the same way you are. So the line has been moving in Oregon State's favor. So we're assuming Rising's out. I think it's safe to,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? I spent about an hour on the message boards last night trying to find any sort of information, and both teams, Utah and Oregon State, and it was just completely unsuccessful. Nothing that we don't already know. They have no
Mm-hmm.
idea what's going on. But it kind of makes sense because they have a bye week coming up. So I'm assuming Coach Witt and his Chamber of Secrets will rest him for another week.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense from that standpoint. I just wish they would just come out and say he's not
Yeah,
going
I
to play
know.
for the bye
It would
week.
make it easy on everyone, right? We wouldn't have to speculate anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just turned into a circus. Like I understand coaches and having some level of secrecy, but I don't know. I just think the Cam Rising thing is just ridiculous. But I think Utah, similar to Florida State, has somehow managed to remain undefeated, even without Rising. But they're on the road, and despite them having that great defense, which I think their defense is better than that 2019 defense that they had. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
their defense is it definitely deserves all the praise and the accolades that they've been getting, but they have a tough time scoring. So I am personally leaning Oregon State. I think that's a good spot for them coming off a close loss against their Pac-2 rival. And I think it's going to be a closer game, but I think Oregon State, I think there's some value on them squeaking it out.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's I'm not in love with the play, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, so two things with this one. One, I will say that even though the line kind of tells us that Rising is probably out, I will say it was 3.5, and it has been bought back down to 3. Now, this can get tricky because there could be just a little bit of uncertainty. Like, let's say Rising has like a 20% chance of playing. Maybe that's why it kind of got bought back to 3. I don't want to say that someone in the market has wind of him playing or not, and I don't think that would be the case because it would go under 3. But I've seen these situations where it's almost like it's not just a all or nothing proposition. It's kind of like we just don't know at this time. So that could be why it was 3. Well, because Bookmaker has it at 3, Circa has it at 3.5. So again, until there's something concrete that comes out, it's probably going to be around 3.5. But if it is announced he's out, I wouldn't be surprised if it moved to 4. I really wouldn't. Oregon State has been a covering machine at home. I believe that they're 11-0 in their last. It's actually 13-0 in their last 13 games at home since 2021 against the spread. So they're covering very well against the spread. Actually, this was before last game. Did they cover last game?
I think it wasn't the line
At
3.
home.
Wasn't it 3, and wasn't the final score 38-35?
Well, that was
No, at home. Sorry.
yeah. So
Let's see.
the San Diego State game, maybe they didn't cover that one. So I guess that was their first one to kill the streak since 2021. But still, I mean, that's a pretty impressive streak, even going 13-1 over 14 games at home. And I think it's a tough place to play. And also I think just Oregon State over that time span has kind of been undervalued. Now I think maybe the market has caught up to them a little bit. Like they understand that they have some talent, but I also lean under Iveta because both of these offenses have just been kind of slow at times. And Utah right now, they don't really have an identity on offense. I feel like they're just trying to win games with their defense. So the under for me is definitely going to be a lean 44.5, and also Oregon State at -3. I think I'm going to fire that up. Actually, I was waiting for it to be 3 at a few spots, and it's 3 on Caesars. So I think that's going to be a play for me too as well.
Yeah, I agree on the under. I would lean that direction as well. And then the other thing about the line too, you mentioned, we are seeing some hint of line movement there. Last week when we were looking at that, when we got the news, the Cam news last week, what the line went from, was it 3 to 6.5 or something like that? I mean, it just, it was just an obvious move. So, I
Yeah,
don't
you got to be kind of like married to the odd screen at this point, because as soon as you see that one way or another start to move, like that's going to tell us everything before before the news comes out on like Twitter or anything. Like we'll see it move, which is crazy. But I mean, I know these guys who know the people who can get this information, and it's crazy. It's not, they're not giving it out for free or publicly immediately, but yeah, I wonder how they get it sometimes. I mean, it's leaking. It's leaking out from whether it's like someone in the training staff or like, a presser before like the official news comes out, gets
yeah.
out to someone else. It's crazy.
100%, yeah, and it's, yeah, exactly, it's either coming straight from the team, and usually, when they're getting it that far in advance, it's usually coming from somebody on staff, because even the
Hmm.
media oftentimes, won't know until a little bit later. Usually by the time somebody in the media knows, then somebody else knows.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and there could be, because the pushback is at the 3 number, there just could be some resistance there, from the other side, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, I might actually, I haven't locked in either Oregon State or the under, but I may very well, take both of those as well with you, because I do feel fairly good about, the under, probably more so than Oregon State, but I don't know. I think this is just, like the perfect upset spot for Utah, or at least it seems that way on paper.
Hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to count Utah out because they've been one of the most consistent programs over the last 10 years under Whittingham. So who knows what could happen? But yeah, definitely gonna just keep my eye out on the Cam Rising news for sure. So let's transition, get into the next game here. Of course, we have to talk about Colorado because I mean that's my favorite school, and also
Mhm.
it's Deion Sanders. I mean, it's it's crazy, but hey, they got some humble pie last week, and I think it was good for them. I think there were a lot of people out there who were probably happy to see them get their ass kicked, which is totally fine. But I do want people to remember, this is a team that was only expected to win 3.5 games, so they're almost exceeding expectations, but they're still at 3 wins. They're 3-1, and they did not look good against Oregon. I think Oregon was ultra motivated in that spot, played a really good game, and Colorado just did not bring it. They did not have the juice, but they might have the juice at home against USC. But this spread is 21.5. Of course, favoring the Trojans with a total of 73.5, 74.5 at some spots. One of the highest totals we've seen. To my knowledge, it's the second highest total of the season. I was explaining to someone else. I was like, yeah, we used to see, an occasional 80, maybe like a 78. But with the new rules, I think it's kind of pushed that down just a tad. But this is still a pretty high total. So do you have any leans in this one?
Well, this line has actually dropped, right? Because it opened at maybe 26 or 25,
Yeah, I
or
think Circo opened it at 25 when they reopened it. Yeah, so
yeah.
definitely
So that
dropped.
that obviously it's not at a great number right now at the 21.5. We'll have to see how that. I think it'll move some more as we get closer to Saturday. Obviously, the narrative has been that neither team will play defense. So that's, like you mentioned, the second highest total. So that score is going to be astronomical. But USC has not been great at covering the spread on the road. And I don't know. It's really hard for me to figure this USC team out because I don't know if that's misleading because of their schedule thus far and they're just not that motivated. They've been playing their backups. It's kind of hard to see what they're what they're actually about. Obviously we know their defense is bad, but even on offense, it's kind of hard to gauge. So I'm having a really tough time with this game because I think that, like you said, Colorado's is going to be more motivated. I think Dion's gonna he's going to learn from last week, and I think he's going to motivate the team. And I think they're definitely going to be able to put some points on the board, but which USC team is going to show up, especially it being on the road. I just, this is probably my least favorite game betting wise because it's just, I can see it. I can see Colorado covering. I can see both teams just scoring, this game being in the 80s. I mean, I can see USC just coming unmotivated. I mean, I honestly just don't know. I'm torn.
Mm-hmm. So I grabbed this at plus 24, and obviously that's not the number that's available now. So we have to talk about, what's available, of course. I was like anything over 3 touchdowns for me, I had to fire up. The difference between Oregon and USC, I think for me is Oregon just has more physicality, and I think that's a weakness that Colorado has. I mean, they do have some big guys offensively up front, but I think defensive line wise, they've really struggled. And USC still has some bigger guys, but I think overall, like that's an advantage that Oregon had, and I think Colorado can neutralize a little bit with their speed because a team like USC, they have a lot of speed, a lot of skill guys. There's going to be a lot of big plays in this one, but yeah, 3 touchdowns. I just think Colorado will have enough on offense to keep it within 3 scores, 21. Now, it's really interesting because when it gets down to 21 after a move of 5-6 points, you have to expect some buyback, right? Because USC 3 touchdowns. I really think we might see the dip there end at 21, and I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of creeps back up to like 20, 22 around there because it just seems unlikely that it's going to go under 21 and a half. That would be my prediction. Again, it's Wednesday, but we'll have to see. And I also like the over. The over is actually a play I locked in. I gave it out last night on stream, and I think we're going to have fireworks in this one. I guess my only concern is if USC gets off to like a weird slow start because it is a 9 a.m. start time for them, 10 a.m. local time here in Colorado. And they're coming off a game where they started at 8:30 local. So, they're college kids, of course, but I have been in those situations playing college football in the past where, it's a weird body clock type situation where, you're waking up at basically 5 a.m. local, right? And, you have to go through the quick walkthroughs, breakfast, and 10 a.m. comes quick, right? And then it's game time. So that could be one little concern for me, but I think overall I do like the over quite a bit in this spot.
Yeah, I like that. I would definitely, definitely lean over rather than under.
A lot of points, though, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about if you actually walk through the game in your mind, I mean, I just don't see. I just think they're both going to score. With the Oregon game, Colorado just didn't score, but
Mm-hmm.
but USC is worse on defense. So I just and the only thing that is causing any sort of hesitation on my end is that sleepy, slow start, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing. It might be low scoring until they kind of warm up a little bit in the second half. But other than that, I just don't see how they're not going to score, So I very much approve of that overplay. But how has that line moved much, the total line?
It's kind of been sitting around 73.5. I did see a few 74.5s yesterday. And even Pinnacle has it at 74.5. But with the total that high, like a move of 1 point isn't super significant just because of the difference between a 73 and a 74, like when you get into the high totals like that. But we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up, but um we'll watch it. And yeah, like you said earlier, there's maybe some minor weather concerns, but we'll see. It probably will be a low impact type of weather spot. All right, let's transition to the next game. This one definitely gonna have some weather. Michigan and Nebraska. Nebraska, excuse me. So this is in Lincoln, Nebraska. Michigan plus 17, or excuse me, minus 17. Some spots actually have it 16.5. I guess Sport Trade has it 16.5. This line has moved. This was closer to, I think, 19, and it's been dropping down. And I'm glad I got in early because I grabbed Nebraska, I think, plus 18.5. And I also got the under, I believe, at 40, but you would probably know that better because I think you guys locked that in. And the under total is currently at 39.5. So what are your thoughts on this one? And tell us about the weather expected for Saturday.
Yeah, so this one actually hasn't moved much, and I think part of that is due to the already low total here. But I think there's still value here. I really like this game. First of all, I just want to see. This is just an exciting game, in my opinion. Just it's Michigan's first road game. They're allowing under 6 points per game right now. Their first 4 games, I think, averaged to 5.75 points allowed. So, third best defensive team in the country as of now, but they've held 14 of their past 17 opponents to under 20 points.
Mm-hmm.
And Nebraska has a decent defense too, right? If they can contain Michigan's rushing attack, right? If they can contain their rushing attack and try to force them to pass the ball, especially the winds have actually gone up. So they were 20 miles per hour, and now we're showing 22 miles per hour in the forecast. But if I think they're going to try to force Michigan to pass. We know both teams can run the ball. Both teams also, this stat is just crazy. Both teams chew up a lot of clock.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this will be a low scoring game, regardless of the weather impacts. But with that additional layer there, I think there's still value there at under 39. So I don't know how much lower I would bet. I think I wouldn't take it under maybe 38 or 37. But I think if you can get the 39 or even the 38, I think there's some value there because I think it's going to be like basically a slugfest. And if the wind, I'm hoping Nebraska can actually, because I do see a scenario if Nebraska can't stop Michigan and then Michigan kind of starts to run up the score a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, but I don't think that'll be the case. Just I think their defense is going to show up. So I really like the under there. So hopefully that and the weather supports that. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you look at the team total and kind of the implied total score in this one, it's going to be right around like 10.5 for Nebraska. So if Nebraska scores 2 touchdowns in this and scores 14, then you're kind of a little worried that this might be a spot that goes over. But I actually think that Michigan isn't going to exceed expectations on offense. I have it being kind of an ugly, like 24-14 game. I think it's going to be, again, low scoring. And I just don't think Michigan is going to be in a position to run it up because when they do get up, I just think that they're going to try to control clock, like you said. In Nebraska, they've been disciplined on defense for the most part. They have at times let up a little bit just depending on the score, but I just think in a spot like this at home against a really good team, it's going to be just a slow game, and both teams are going to run regardless. One thing I do want to point out is Nebraska does have a new quarterback. He has started the last few games. I think it's Henrik Harburg, and he's a 6'5" redshirt sophomore, and he came in the Colorado game a little bit, and then he's played in the Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech game. So obviously no Michigan defense yet, like he's seen a team like that. But I do like what I've seen out of him, and I think the difference with him from Jeff Sims is he can make those throws when need be. He still has a lot to work on from the passing game perspective, but he did rattle off like a 70-yard touchdown run, had some wheels. So I'm just hoping that in this game, he doesn't go off and score over 2 touchdowns for the sake of the under, but I do think he can get a score here or there to keep this within the number here. But not a lot of margin for error though on a total like this, because again, if Nebraska scores over 2 touchdowns, scores in 14, 17 type points, this is probably going to go over.
Right. And so that's my only concern is Nebraska, how Nebraska's going to respond. And I think, like you said, their defense has been disciplined. So I do think that I think they're just going to eat so much clock that they're not going to be able to, get to this number. But that's why it probably hasn't dropped much. But then again, we saw that in that Iowa State game, people are afraid to take the under because the total is at 36.5. But I mean, the reason the total's at 36.5 is because, I mean, they're not gonna put a 28-point total on the board.
I've always noticed that it's almost like the bookmakers can never move the line too low. Like they're in a position where it's almost like, well, if we drop it to like 38, then maybe the action is gonna kind of be weird, and are people gonna take an under 38 at that point? But yeah, if the numbers support it, sure, I will. If we think it's gonna be a game that goes way under and we have huge weather implications, like if we get those crazy games where we get like 35-mile-per-hour winds, it's like, shit, I'll take an under 32.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could be a 21-7 game, I mean, but yeah, it's more often than not, and I'd love to see the actual numbers on this, but more often than not, when you have a really low total, especially under 40, and I'm going to dig into this because I just convinced myself. I'm very curious.
Yeah.
If you have a total under 40, how many times does that game go under? I'm very, very curious because I want to say more often than not that under hits.
I would guess my hypothesis would be that it hits around like 54% of the time, which would be profitable taking the unders. That'd be my guess. But yeah, I'm sure we could research that and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, let's transition to the next game here, going to the SEC, and we have LSU taking on Ole Miss, and this is an LSU team that you saw in person, Iveta. Ole Miss coming off a loss against Alabama, which was a game we talked about last week, and I'm kind of glad I stayed off of it because I was leaning with Ole Miss, and yeah, Ole Miss in the second half of that game just could not generate yards offensively. And then LSU, kind of a weird game against Arkansas last week. Arkansas covered, and I don't know if they were kind of overlooking Arkansas, but yeah, I'm glad I wasn't on that one either, unless I was going to be on the Arkansas side. I'm showing the spread here, -2.5 for LSU, a total of 66.5, 67, depending on what book you're looking at. What are your thoughts with this game?
This is kind of a tough spot. I'm not running to the window for this game. I think it can really go either way. My lean is LSU. They have looked pretty good overall since the FSU loss. Uh, but then again, Ole Miss after the Alabama game, I don't know. I think talent-wise, LSU should be able to cover that, but I could see this being a close game. I mean, I heard a stat yesterday, and I didn't actually confirm it, but I think Ole Miss's leading rusher is Jackson Dart. Is that
Yeah,
true? He leads the team in rushing yards?
yeah, which is weird because Judkins, he was a stud last year, and like this season, I don't know what's going on. I would have to like watch the tape, but I think his yards per carry would just way down. I don't know if teams are trying to like load the box against him,
Mhm.
but it doesn't really make a lot of sense because he was spectacular last season and he's getting touchdowns still, but yeah, his efficiency has really dropped. So that's a little bit of a concern. I mean, 3.5 yards is what he's at, and last season he was at 5.7 yards per rush. So yeah, that was a really good point to bring up. And Dart not only has to make plays with his arm, he's been making plays with his feet too.
Right. So, and both teams are fairly beat up. They're tired. I don't know. It's one of these things where, uh, maybe even, I, I don't know. What's the total? That might be a lean for me.
66 and a half, 67 and a half, depending on what book. Are you leaning under?
Yeah. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go under here. I don't know. I mean, LSU is they're definitely the more Jaden Daniels is pretty efficient. I think that they could win this by 7 or it could be a close game. Um, but yeah, I mean the Judkins thing is just wild. He was one of the best rushers in the SEC last season.
Mhm.
So, I don't know, but then again, the LSU misses a lot of tackles. I don't know. That's what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts, I guess, I would lean with Ole Miss, I think, partly because I think Alabama defensively really stepped up in that game. Like, I think it was more what they did on defense than, bad play on offense from Ole Miss.
Mhm.
And I think Ole Miss coming off of that game, I think they'll be in a decent spot back at home. I was just curious, and I was looking up just kind of the results of this rivalry, and it looks like LSU won last year, 45-20, and then the year before that, when it was in Oxford, um, 31-17. Ole Miss won. That's when they were ranked 12th, and I think that's when they would have been Matt Corral. I think he would have played in that game. I know he had an injury, but a lot of different players. I don't think Brian Kelly was even there. But anyways, yeah, I just think that LSU may be just a tad overvalued, and I think with the points, maybe take Ole Miss. Kind of curious what the money line is here too. Looks like plus 127, plus 127 on Sport Trade. Not bad. I mean, that may be the look for me. We'll see. Even DraftKings has it at plus 140. I might have to look a little more into that, but that would be my lean as of now is the Ole Miss side.
Interesting. Yeah, that I'm just jaded by the Ole Miss side because I took them to cover against them.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't
So
looking bad at first, but yeah, the second half was just like I, I I wasn't watching it, but I just was looking at some of the stats, and I'm like, a lot of 3 and outs, just a lot of empty possessions. So yeah.
yeah, but you're right. They're not a bad team. So I mean, this could be the game that they show up for, given their. But I just see it going at a slower pace, just due to both of the games that both teams just came off of.
Hmm.
Just more physical. Just I mean, like you said, that Arkansas game was weird. So yeah, but I don't know. I will probably just stay away from this one altogether.
For sure. Yeah, and I'm gonna watch this line. I'll see if it kind of trends in Ole Miss's direction come closer to kickoff as well. So let's get into the next one. Going to the ACC, we have Clemson on the road taking on Syracuse. Syracuse at home. Looking like 6.5, 7 for Clemson. Been moving a little bit, kind of bouncing back and forth. Total 52.5. Early game here. I think they still play in the Carrier Dome, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So Carrier Dome. I was actually looking at some of the past games, and Clemson has pretty much dominated Syracuse over the years, but they did have that one game, I think it was 2017, where they lost in the Carrier Dome. But it's still like a tricky spot to play. And it really comes down to what you think of Clemson at this point, coming off that tough loss, of course, to Florida State, maybe a game they probably could have won. But do you have faith in Clemson to cover the number?
No, so I actually lean Syracuse here. I think this is going to be a close game. Uh, Obviously, with Clemson, there's a huge motivation factor going in. They've got a chip on their shoulder. Uh, they're looking to avoid the huge preseason expectations. They're looking to avoid starting 0-3. They arguably should have won that game against Florida State, given they made that kick. The whole kicker disaster thing happened, and
Mm-hmm.
um, but they couldn't finish drives. And obviously, there were it was more than just a kicker issue, but so they're definitely going to go in to Syracuse with the motivation factor that they've got that on their side. But Schrader has looked good on the flip side. I do worry about him getting pressured by Clemson's defense, but I still the number for me is the key. So Clemson took a little bit of money because the line moved. It was 6.5. That line
Mm-hmm.
moved to 7. And so you just said it just bounced back to it's bouncing back the other
Yeah,
way.
it seems like it's kind of going a little back and forth. Like at circa, it was 7, back to 6, or to 6, back to 7, 6.5. So it's just teeter tottering around the key number.
Okay, so yeah, so I like it at 7. I wouldn't play it at anything else, but I like the Syracuse plus 7. I think that's I mean, I think they can win outright. So I think there's money line potential there too. But my only hesitation is just that Clemson's motivation factor. So for me, it's one of two things, right? It's either they're motivated and they're going to finish the season strong, or they're at the point now where they're so deflated and they have nothing to play for, so they're just not going to show up at all. So that's my apprehension there is I just don't know what their mindset is at this point in the season.
I think that's a fair look because I typically like to use that narrative when a team is on the road, and they are, versus if they
Mhm.
were coming back home. Um, I just think it's tough to go from, big game to big game like that. And, now you take on a Syracuse team all the way in New York, right? It's it's a distance for them, based on some of the other schools they play that are closer proximity. And Garrett Schrader has looked pretty good on offense. He's kind of a dual threat guy. Um, I think it's safe to say he might be the better quarterback in this matchup head to head. So
Oh yeah.
I mean, Klubnik. I mean, I don't know. I think he will have better days ahead of him, but he's yeah he's just not confident. I think is one of the issues I see with him. So I think at 7, I think that's a pretty good look, getting the points with Syracuse.
It's almost that line actually surprised me. It's almost like it's too many points. And it kind of almost made me take a step back and think, okay, is there something that I'm missing here? Why is this line of, because I kind of expected this to be at maybe like a 4.5 or a 5.5, something like that,
Mhm.
especially after, Clemson has been kind of exposed. But yeah, I mean, and on the road, like you said, so but I don't see any reason not to take Syracuse at 7. So I actually already played this at 7. So
Mhm. Yeah, and there's still a few 7s out there. You just kind of have to look around. Not as widely available, but yeah, look for a 7. I think that's a good look, and if I can find one, I'm probably gonna get there too, because I think that's a good look. And yeah, Syracuse is gonna be pumped for this one. They're gonna be ready to go, and um, kind of curious what the money line's at too.
mhm. Yeah,
Ooh,
same.
plus 200. Yeah. We'll see if I get there with the money line. But let's get into the last game here. Notre Dame taking on Duke. Of course, Notre Dame coming off that crazy game against Ohio State, and I'm still in shock that they had 2 consecutive plays to basically end the game with only 10 players.
Right.
Insane. And of course, they literally run to the side of the defensive line where the missing player would have been. I mean, it's tough, because I think that could have changed the outcome of the game. I think if that player is there, I don't know if he gets in. And if they stuff him, I think that would have been game. So crazy game. And now you have a turnaround, and you got to play Duke. And Duke's a good team. Duke beat Clemson, who we just talked about. Um, I think Duke is for real. I don't know if they're a team that is like going to make a run for the playoff and anything like that, but I think they are a talented team. So this spread is at 5.5, and the total's at 52.5, 51.5 at FanDuel. Do you think Notre Dame bounces back after that, or do you think that this is a pretty good spot for Duke?
So that's a great question. I've been back and forth on this. I think initially I thought this was a great spot for Notre Dame, but was that 5.5?
Yeah, 5.5, and I don't see it getting to 6 or anything like that. I think it's gonna maybe 6, but no way it goes over 6.
Yeah. Initial lean was Notre Dame. I think that they're still the better team, even though Elko is going to motivate. Duke's going to be motivated. They're going to come out. But then again, even with that Duke Clemson game, remember that was a weird game because Clemson arguably should have won that game. If they didn't have all that weird stuff happen in the red zone, and so it's one of those things where. But I do agree that Duke's a good team. So I do like the under here. I lean the under. If I had to pick a side, I at 5.5. I mean, I lean Notre Dame,
Mhm.
but I'm not overly confident. This week, I was just thinking about how weird this week is. I think there's such a high potential for upsets because you have all these teams. You've got Utah, you've got LSU, you've got Notre Dame, you've got Clemson that are all going on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of these teams are coming off of close losses or close wins. So it's kind of an interesting week. I think it's kind of a tough week from a betting perspective because, I think we could see some upsets here. So I'm not, yeah, I mean, I lean under and Notre Dame, but this is admittedly the game that I've looked into the least. So I still need to dig into it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I have a little more confidence, I'll play the under more so than the Notre Dame side. But I'm not opposed to the Notre Dame side if I can find some enough supporting information for that.
Yeah. I think for me, like looking at this game, definitely looking at Notre Dame with the ball and, what they're going to do with the ball. And of course, they're going to try to run the ball with S-Team. And Duke on defense has been decent against the run. They haven't been great. Like they're kind of middle of the pack, like 3.8 yards allowed per carry. So they're not exceptional, but they're also not, they're not allowing anything crazy like over 5 yards per carry. It really comes down to, can Duke stop them in the red zone? Because I think if they do that, they definitely will cover this. And I think the under, which is a bet I like quite a bit, I think it's contingent on that too, because Notre Dame's going to move the ball. They're going to get long possessions, and I think Duke offensively too will have efficient drives with Riley Leonard. Just kind of comes down to what they do in the red zone. I don't see a lot of turnovers in this game as well. But I like the under because I do think the clock is going to be ticking quite a bit. Both teams kind of play slower, and 52 and a half, I think it's fair. We could see some weather in this, correct?
Yeah, so as of now, the weather has backed off a little bit, but we did see, and that's partly due to the fact that the system is moving a little bit to the north. So we're showing that it may not impact North Carolina as much as as originally thought. So now it's looking like Virginia northward is where the impacts are going to be, but that's still pretty low confidence. So there's a slight chance, but again, I wouldn't count on it. It's the way, especially when you look at the FCS tab and you look at all those games, that's very telling of kind of where the models think that the system is going to be. So I wouldn't count on it, but there is a chance. There's definitely still a chance that, which of course would help our under if that were the case.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna rely on that, but it would be nice. It's always nice to have a handicap for and under, weather aside, and then that can kind of be the added layer, and it's always a good sign to have that on your side. So let's get into our best bets. It could be any games we talked about. It could be Friday or even the Saturday games, of course, or the Friday games. I think we even have some Thursday games too, but it's a smaller Thursday slate. I'll start with you, Avetta. What's your best bet for the weekend?
I'm gonna have to go with the Michigan Nebraska under. I think that's my best bet. And my second would probably be that Syracuse +7.
I like it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to fire up Syracuse. It just makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, it kind of depends, but I'll have spots like this where if I like the points, I'll sprinkle a little bit on the money line. It kind of depends like what my unit size would be for that, but probably like 0.2 units on the money line, and then maybe a unit on the spread there, because I just think it's one of those spots that everything kind of aligns with Syracuse to get a win there.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a great money line play.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Makes almost too much sense, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. For me, my best bet is going to be Colorado USC over 73.5. I don't think we have to say too much, and I already went into it, but there's going to be fireworks. I think Caleb Williams is going to want to put on a show like usual, and I think Sanders will bounce back from pretty poor outing in Eugene, Oregon, and hopefully we'll see points in this one. And hopefully Colorado covers, but it's just one of those spots where coming off a game against a tough defense like Oregon and then going to play a defense like USC, I think it will be a breath of fresh air. And I think the playmakers for Colorado, wideout wise, will make plays, even with a guy like Travis Hunter not gonna be in this game again for the second straight week. And that hurts them on defense too, because he's a two-way player. So expect fireworks in that game as well.
I like that. I think I'm gonna you've convinced me. And there's nobody I trust more on a Colorado line than you. So I think I am gonna take that over before it gets too bet up for sure.
Yeah. And I think you'll have a little bit of time on this one, because even if it goes to like 74 or 75, the every point does matter, but the difference, with the total that high, it's not as significant as if, we're talking a total of 40 to down to 39, right? Just from a percentage ratio standpoint. So,
Right.
but sooner the better, always.
Yeah, and that also goes with the thing we're talking about with the unders, right? It's once the total is that high, right? There's only so high that the books are going to set the total. So
Very true.
I think oftentimes I'm going to add that to my research. So games under 40 and then totals over 70. So totals under 40 and totals over 70. And
yeah, I actually think Kyle Hunter was saying something, and I don't know if he had the concrete data, but he was saying like totals that high, they typically go over, right? They're high, they're high for a reason, and they sometimes just they don't move at a certain point. They just kind of hit like a threshold. So Chad, if you guys have any questions on any of the games this weekend, let us know. What was that other one we were going to talk about? Florida and Kentucky.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that one?
Gosh, so I was just about to ask you the same thing. I have no idea what to do with that. That's another one of those games this week that where it's in Kentucky, right? And I don't know. I had really high hopes for Devin Leary, starting out the season, and then I don't know. I haven't really been following them much. But I could see this game going either way, and I was gonna solicit your opinion here, because I don't even know if I'm gonna bet it, just because I'm so torn. I can see both sides.
Yeah, I lean with Florida, but like I don't really know what to make of this game. I don't even know how good Kentucky is, and I'm still trying to figure out like what Florida is, and I think Florida's ceiling is fairly low too with Mertz. Interesting note though with this, I guess you can call it a rivalry. It feels like every SEC game is just a rivalry.
Yeah.
This would be the first time since, I think you got to go back to like the 50s, that if Kentucky were to win, they would win 3 straight against Florida. So I don't know if that impacts anything to do with the handicap here, but I did find that kind of fascinating, because there was a stretch from like, it looks like 1987 to 2017. So we're talking what, 20 years, or 87. So we're even talking, how does math work? Yeah, that's about 30 years where they won every game in this matchup. So I don't know if you say the tides are turning here, but I mean, Kentucky's program, it's turned around since the early 2000s, and I think they'll have a lot of confidence at home in this spot.
Yeah, and I think these teams are fairly evenly matched, which is why I think the line is close to a pick 'em, right? It's 1? Is it at 1?
Yeah, 1, 2.5, but yeah, essentially it's
Oh, okay,
floating right around there.
you've got it up there. Yeah, so I don't have any faith in this Florida team either. Kentucky's 4-0, but of course they've played 2 MAC teams in Eastern Kentucky and Vanderbilt. So and you know, Florida paid 500,000 to play McNeese just so they would, wouldn't have a loss on their record.
Exactly. The
So
classic buy game, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things where I I would lean Kentucky actually if I had to make a play on this, but I don't know. I could see Florida winning this by a field goal or something, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. I might watch this one and see if I can find anything live that I like, but, um, yeah, just kind of a ugly game. And this, segment, guys, Best Bets, sponsored by Sport Trade. If you're in, New Jersey or Colorado, definitely check them out. Pretty good lines. I find some really good lines, and I love to live bet with them because it's easy to pull money out. Pretty good offers too, like in-game stuff. You're not gonna get those shitty cash out options like some of the other books. So definitely check them out, and you can use our promo code CW if you're in New Jersey or Colorado. So we have actually two requests. These are two games that I honestly haven't looked into as much. Georgia State, Troy, I think is one of them. Do you have anything with this one?
What a great game.
I know.
Oh my god. Let me
Georgia
think.
State, I always get them in Southern mixed
Georgia,
up.
yeah.
I think that's right. They won against Coastal last Thursday. That was the game where they were, I think, 7-point dogs, and then there was some late action that came in, and then I think it dropped down to like plus 4.5, and they ended up winning outright. They're 4-0. So, they have confidence. Troy, on the other hand, they're 2-2. So it kind of seems like a spot, like I don't want to overthink this one. And I kind of want to lean with Georgia State, but it almost seems like too obvious at minus one. Like the bookmakers are essentially saying that on a neutral, Troy would be the better team here. So that's kind of weird to me a little bit.
Yeah, Troy's kind of regressed this year. I feel like they had that awesome end to the season last year. And then, so I actually got burned by Georgia State last week because I had Coastal to cover that. And um, I also lean Georgia State. If I had to bet this right now, I would take Georgia State. But yeah, like you said, Troy is 2-2. And again, that's just I've kind of followed them a little bit just because I've bet on them twice this season, but nothing significant. And then Troy, my only experience with them was that James Madison game, which they lost by
Hmm.
2. Also Kansas State, actually. I think I took them to cover against Kansas
Hmm.
State, and they did not. So, and their defense has gotten a little bit worse this season as well. So I would lean Georgia State, and I 100% agree with you. I don't know why this line is so low, especially at home.
Yeah, I think one of the things could be their momentum. They won in the Cure Bowl last season, and they were ranked 19th, and there were some higher hopes for them entering the season. And I think James Madison beating them. James Madison's a good team, but they're coming off a win against Western Kentucky, so there's that. So maybe it's a little bit of like the priors and people expecting Troy entering the season to be good, and yeah, definitely tricky. I'm not gonna fire up a bet yet in this one. I kind of want to see what the line does, because I wouldn't be surprised if you see some sharp action on Troy, like, and then we're gonna be like, what the hell? So,
Yeah.
Sun Belt, Fun Belt.
Right.
We'll see.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if there are any injuries or anything that I'm not seeing, but I haven't looked into that. But yeah, I mean, initial lean is Georgia State, uh, and the line. How has the line moved?
Oh yeah, that's a good. Let me go back to that real quick. It looks like it. See, it opened up. Yeah, it opened up at 2, and then it jumped up to 4 for Troy plus 4, and then it here we are at
Yeah.
basically plus 1. So yeah, I I wouldn't be surprised if you see sharps on kind of both sides of the coin here at this number.
Yeah.
And then the other one we had a redemption for is James Madison. -3 at home against South Alabama. I'm gonna lean with them. Like I think they're a pretty solid team. I just like what I've seen out of them, even since last season. But South Alabama's they're a team that I bet on, I think, earlier this season, and they let me down.
Same.
They're no
Mhm.
slouch, though.
Yeah, I same. James Madison has played everybody close except for Bucknell, obviously, but
Mhm.
they played Virginia close, they played Troy close, they played Utah State fairly close, touchdown, but it was a higher scoring game. South Alabama, I've lost a lot of faith in them. I mean, I was pretty high on them at the beginning of the season, and they just got beat by Central Michigan, who is not a good team. Um,
And then the week before, they beat
they beat
Oklahoma
Oklahoma
State,
State,
yeah,
who is also not a good team.
by
So
26, which is crazy.
yeah, so it's really interesting. And then the week prior, they just barely 35-17 against Southeast Louisiana is kind of
Yeah,
is
they
not
probably
is
didn't cover.
right. They probably didn't cover. And then, they got they lost by 20 to Tulane, and we know that that was an injured Tulane, right? They didn't have Pratt in that game.
Mhm.
So, yeah, this is a really interesting matchup. I'm gonna actually dig more into that because I I lean James Madison as well, but I can see that being a what's the total? 49 and a half. Um
Yeah. I'm gonna look more into this one, but yeah, it's kind of a similar scenario to what we're seeing in that other Sunbelt game we just talked about, like where you have a home team, you feel like they're gonna have the advantage, of course, being at home, but you also have the road team that has had expectations that were good headed into the season. So these ones are fun because there's the side of you that has to look at what they've done the last few weeks, and then there's also like what were the expectations headed into the year. But at 4-game sample size, you start to trend more to what you've seen you know this season, right?
Exactly. So yeah, so that's why I'm leaning James Madison. They've at least shown that they put up a fight. So at the very least, we know South Alabama's not going to go in and blow them out. That's
Hmm.
enough for me for that low of a line. I mean, that's enough for me to take them. And I might actually fire a money line play on that. Or
Yeah.
no, it's their
Oh
favorite.
no, they're the favorite. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, no one's stopping you from taking the
I got
money line. Then hey, if the
got
number's there, the
excited.
number's there, right?
I got excited. I was like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
money line play," but yeah, they're favored. But still, I mean, 3, yeah, I would at the 3, I love that. At 3.5,
Hmm.
maybe not as much, but but yeah, definitely feel more confident about that than that Georgia State Troy. But I don't know. I mean, something's just fishy with that Georgia State line at 3.5 at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
don't.
I wanna look more into that. Like, this is a classic like contrarian play, like the Troy game where it's like, oh, this line doesn't really make sense. Like, give me Troy, right? Like,
Right.
it's funny, but I typically don't look at games that way. Like, I won't, I won't say like, oh, it's fishy, take the fishy team. I like to say like, well, maybe there actually is just value on Georgia State, right? Like maybe we're getting a good number here. So yeah, Fun Belt's always fun.
Mhm.
I'm gonna dive deeper into those two, but let's call it. I dropped your Twitter. I'm like, what do we call? I still call it Twitter. Well, it literally has Twitter
It
still in
literally
the
says Twitter.
yeah. So it's like, what am I supposed to call it? So, anyways, there's your Twitter. Make sure to give her a follow. Better weather. You guys are going to be updating things as more information comes in. So yeah, stay tuned for any changes that we may see with some of those East Coast games, and of course, kind of the Central Plains states, to see if we get any updated news too. And then I guess the Wyoming New Mexico game, that was like another that was I think it was red, but maybe it dropped down.
Yes. Yeah, it was, and that one dropped down. But again, there's weather in that area, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that. And I just want to remind everybody, like you said earlier, Ben, the FCS games,
Yeah.
don't forget about those because once I saw somebody in the chat say that their book releases them on Monday or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So you
That's
do have,
nice.
yeah, so you do
Yeah,
have some.
let me know what book that is. That's crazy.
I saw that earlier. Yeah. So you do have if you do get a chance to bet those, oftentimes we forget about them and there's a lot of value there, or there definitely has been so far this college football season. So definitely check those out. Better Weather has those games. So, pull up the map and keep an eye on those. And as soon as those lines get released, they get populated into Better Weather. So check that out. And right now, there is the Central Arkansas at Southern Utah is a very strong under right now. It's showing 26 mile per hour winds and showers and thunderstorms likely. So if that game doesn't get delayed, that might be, of course, there's no line yet for that game,
Mm-hmm.
but that's that one. And then the North Carolina A&T Norfolk State game. So
Yeah,
yeah.
there'll be a few opportunities, and yet those lines typically come out like Saturday morning
Mhm.
around, it would be 11 a.m. Eastern Standard, that roughly. Sometimes a little earlier. Kind of depends. Like last week, some of them came out like only 30 minutes before. I noticed, and yeah, the books used to.
Mhm.
We were mentioning it earlier. Five Dimes isn't an operation anymore, and then even WinBet last year was like originating lines themselves, and they were doing it by Tuesday or Wednesday of the week. So yeah, Heisenberg, you're correct on that, but it's weird that we're taking a step backwards.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, so check those out. We often neglect our FCS games.
I know.
There's
Yeah,
but
they're
there's
my favorite, especially in college basketball, which is
Mhm.
right around the corner.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. I guess in basketball, it's not FCS, but um, they're still the same teams, right? So
Right. And still the same
smaller
amount of
conferences.
value. Yeah,
Yep.
those lines are way softer than, I mean, the
Oh
market
yeah.
is smaller, so there's just a lot easier to make money off of the less you know about the less people know about a conference, the more lucrative it is.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Big Sky, I've been eating in that conference for years. So, all right, we're gonna call it. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Tomorrow, I guess it will be Nick and then Jason Gold will be on for Thursday Night Football, the Thursday night preview, and then Friday we'll have the Pickett stream, of course, and then no stream on Saturday, and then Sunday we will be live for um what is it? for NFL. Had a brain fart there. And then let's see. And then Monday, we'll do it all again. And then college basketball. Oh man, that's
Can't
coming up
wait.
really soon. Yeah,
Can't
I'm
wait.
excited.
First day of practice was this week, and yeah, so it's right around the corner. And what's the twist this week, Ben?
The twist, we're going with quarterback under props for passing props. So you could do under yards, under touchdowns, under completions, under attempts. Trying to mix it up and make people, play some bets and do some research on some markets that maybe they haven't done before. So, yeah, we have some fun twists coming up too. So, I don't know. Did you enter last week?
No, so I missed last week because I was
You were traveling. That's right.
Yeah, but I saw it and because it was the prop, right?
So last week was
Player prop, right?
Yeah. No. Last week was 0-2 teams. So you had to you had to bet a 0-2 team. Yeah, but the week before that I think was a prop, and it was like a running back prop, and not a lot of people did well. There were like 4 or 5 injuries I think that people had overs on. So overall I think people had a down week, but we'll see if we can as a collective group bounce back after the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a fun contest.
Yeah, it's been fun. So, alrighty, it's 12 noon on the East Coast. We're gonna call it. Appreciate you guys once again, and we will talk to you guys later.